So, greetings, hello. Welcome to colleagues here and near and far. Thanks for coming to the Philosophy Club, and yes, it's a good way of keeping in touch, catching up with the state of the world, which is moving quite fast. In this, I do this every Sunday evening, and I've got a little prize here. Please work out how far the planet travels in those 7 days, both around its own axis, 7 times around 20,000 miles approximately, but also, around the solar system on its annual, because it takes a year to go round. So, anyway, there's a little, and I think the answer is a long way, hundreds of thousands of miles, in every 7 days, possibly millions, I don't know. And I've been reading about Magellan, the great Portuguese explorer who sailed around the world for the first time. I just want to share, to begin with, this book, which I found here locally. It's a review of Magellan's famous voyage, but also modern day explorers who since him have been around the whole world. And there's some extraordinary people, who circumnavigate the globe. And I think what we're trying to do in the Philosophy Club is sort of circumnavigate the intellectual globe. Although I think travel is very important, and I do encourage people to travel as much as possible. And, if I ever have time, I intend to write up a book of journeys, which would be all the travels I've done, which is quite a lot, to different parts of the world, 35 countries so far. And I've learned an awful lot from all that. It's when I first read Herodotus, the great founder of the historian's profession, that I realised why travel is so important. Because it expands one's mind, it introduces you to other cultures, and you learn not to be self-centred in your cultural assumptions, and to realise that we're all equidistant from the centre of the earth. Wherever we are on the earth, we're always at the centre of it, so to speak. So anyway, so what else? Okay, a few words just to introduce before we start our look at the periodic table and so on. I've been working hard on my 99 Names of Peace this week. It takes about a couple of days to finish one of these chapters, of which there are 99. I'm intending to finish it by Christmas, the book, which is, a lot of work. But it's a labour of love. I've done the Thai language, and I looked at the project for that is to do with sacred time and a calibration of all the different religious calendars on the planet, because the Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian calendars are all out of sync. They all measure time from different times. Like we're so many years after Buddha's Enlightenment, we're so many years after the Hijra of Muhammad, we're so many years after Christ's birth, and so on. What I'm proposing in this project is that all the religious leaders of the planet come together, sign a peace pact, non-violence treaty, and then we have a sort of common calendar from that day, where we all say, okay, that's a bit like the French Revolution, they started again from year 1. So I'm saying, if all the religions could sign a peace treaty and stick to it, then we could start again with peacetime, universal peacetime. And what's wrong with that anyway? And why not reopen the Golden Gate in the Eastern Wall of Jerusalem, Old City, at the same time? So that's the project, which I wrote up, associated with the Thai language. Catalan, I've done the Mary Magdalene Studies work, which is ongoing and interesting. And Catalan is a great language. I've done Slovenian recently, associated with archaeological and historical studies for peace. And I've just finished Romanian language. And the notion of spiritual communism. Now that's, to me, a very interesting one, because I think the project, it's a research project, sets out to document the history of the concept of communism, which started in Poland in the 16th century as a radical theological critique of conventional Christianity. It was the what we call the Polish Brethren, who were Unitarians, who wanted to live, in their view, like the earliest Christians, sharing everything in common, not going for wealth, power, glory and status. And it was said of them they were communists. Now I want to study the history of the usage among the Polish Brethren, which inspired other radical movements across Europe. And the idea of communism then migrated, it seems, to France in the course of the 1700s. So it's being used in radical circles in Paris to mean someone that wanted like a total transformation of society. I want to study who exactly was using it. And then it got to, later in the 19th century, it got into the hands of left Hegelians like Moses Hess, who was a socialist communist, and also Trzaskowski, a great Polish intellectual, and others who identified with communism. They meant we want to be part of the universal brotherhood of the invisible church. They were all Hegelian, esoteric universalists, sort of Christians, but not conventional types. Some were, officially like Catholic or Protestant, but that wasn't what they meant by a communist. Anyway, the thing that's true about all of these guys, it was a spiritual state of transformation. They thought that being a communist was a sort of metaphysical statement about human unity and brotherhood and sisterhood. And somehow in the 19th century, and that was true in radical discussions in Paris among intellectuals, in the course of the 19th century, the word changed its meaning. Moses Hess, who was a spiritual communist, introduced Marx and Engels to each other, and they decided they were cleverer than everyone else, and that from now on it would become a materialist concept, and that to be a communist you had to be an absolute materialist. And they looked with arrogant disdain on everyone they called an idealist. But that transformed the concept from what was a beneficial, I think, beautiful idea of communism, a sort of voluntary, spiritual association of free spirits, like a kind of Rosicrucian brotherhood, into something that became unethical and was determined by the iron hand of dialectical history, that you will be a communist or you will be shot. It ends up in the time of Lenin and Stalin, Mao and Pol Pot. And in the 20th century, there have been about 20 million people killed by materialist communists who inverted the meaning, hadn't got a clue of what it originally meant. And it's as if suddenly people start calling black white and white black. So this project, which is incredibly important, traces that history. How did we get it so wrong? What happened? Was it just the general European kind of conceit of materialism that people like Marx and Engels thought that was progress? Anyway, there's huge discussions. That's what that project is about. And I thought it goes well with Romanian, which was a communist country for many years, and had all kinds of geniuses, but also lots of troubles with the people that ran it. And eventually they got free of that system. Then I've been doing Pushtu, which is the language of Afghanistan, majority language. And it's an amazing language. I've fallen in love with Pushtu, the Afghan language. It turns out to be closely related to Bactrian, which is the language of the first prophet, Zoroaster, in Balkh, which is a city in northern Afghanistan where he came from. And Pushtu is like a literal descendant of the ancient Zoroastrian type speech patterns. And their words are incredible. I found an online etymological dictionary of Pushtu, which was written by a Norwegian linguist from the University of Oslo, who went to visit in the early 20th century. He had a letter from the King of Norway to the King of Afghanistan. I think it was 1927, saying, please look after this guy and help him in his studies. And this guy was an absolute genius. George Morgenstern, I believe it means the morning star. He was a brilliant linguist, and he travelled all over Afghanistan, visited many times for about 20 years. And he went and talked to obscure villages and copied down their words, and he produced an etymological dictionary of the language, which is fascinating stuff. So, for instance, I've learned there's a word in Old Pushtu which means aware, intelligence, po, P-O-H. Now, I can bet my bottom socks that that is related to the word Buddha in Sanskrit and other Indian languages, because they're cognate, right? The Pushtu is an Indo-European language, so are the old Indian ones. But po, awareness, intelligence, giving us poha, meaning intelligent, is absolutely going to be related to Buddha or Buddhi. But the details need working on. So I'm on the job. That's the point of doing this 99 Names of Peace. And I think the Pashto people need to come in from the cold, because the rest of the world demonizes Afghanistan. They're amazing people. I've had Afghan friends, and I've taught Afghan students, and they have a profound understanding of Islam, a tolerance of all faiths. I've met Sufis from Afghanistan and studied with them, and we've got to stop demonizing the Afghans. So this is why I'm doing this 99 Names of Peace project. And then, so that's been quite busy, really. And then the project that goes with that is planetary demining. There's far too many landmines on the planet, laid in Afghanistan by both the Soviet invasion and then the Americans. And, there are millions of mines still in Afghanistan, and people are getting blown up. Kids walking in the hills get their legs blown off. It's got to stop. And there are other countries where heavily mined. Yemen is one, Syria, Congo, Ukraine and Russia, they're both mining away. And this is what's killing innocent people, you see. So that's why we're launching this Irish Lex Innocentium on the 21st of September. And I've discovered there's a worldwide charity that campaigns for the ending of landmines, based in Geneva. It also campaigns for the ending of cluster bombs, which are horrible, like sort of mobile landmines you drop from a bomb that then releases 50 little bomblets which can go off. They often don't, and then kids step on them later and get blown up. So I feel very strongly about stopping these landmines. That's why we need a planetary ceasefire. We need to stop these wars in Gaza, Ukraine, etc., and clean up the planet. And there's about 50 million landmines still in the planet. My late Princess of Wales, who I esteemed greatly, Princess Diana, she was campaigning against landmines at the end of her life with her Muslim boyfriend, Dodi, and they were mysteriously assassinated. I think it's fair to say. By whom? By an arms company that didn't want planetary demining. I mean, it's possible. The arms industry, the arms lobby are hugely powerful. And someone like Princess Diana being a voice for peace and demining, especially with a Muslim, gosh, take them out. So that case has still never been properly investigated. I've seen evidence that a bright light was shone into the driver's eyes as he entered the tunnel at Pont d'Alma, and this is what made him crash. I suspend judgment, but I do think these questions need to be asked and answered. So anyway, planetary demining, please. That's the project there. And then the next one I'm working on is Kurdish, which is another fascinating language. And the people of Kurdistan are scattered between Iran, Iraq, Syria, etc. They don't have a country. They weren't given a country at the end of World War I when other people got one, which was a mistake. I mean, they should have given them a country. But they're amazing people, and their language is very ancient. They include the Yazidis, who go back to the time of Zoroaster and even before. They have a theology that's really ancient. So by looking at the languages in this way, I'm able to call for a sort of planetary peace conversation in which all these languages are seen as sacred, and their wisdom should be brought forward by philosophers, poets, cultural heroes in each of these traditions. Yeah, I've been studying Pashto poetry, for instance. It's, this is deep stuff. Okay, so that's one thing I've been up to, and that keeps me busy. And then also, I'm getting ready to go to Britain. I'm going off to teach a course on Enlightenment and mindfulness in Poole, where I used to be head of religious studies and philosophy at the grammar school in Poole. I know that part of Dorset. It's a great place. So there's just time. If anyone wants to come, it's next weekend. I'll be teaching in person there. And yeah, enlightenment is really quite important. We need to. My argument is that like Plato, I say that ignorance is what causes suffering, and ignorance is what causes wars and violence and hatred and alienation and so on and so on. So we need more wisdom, and the ultimate wisdom is enlightenment itself. So I'll be looking at that in all the different traditions, and I've been writing out a kind of prospectus. Mindfulness is just one of the things you need to reach enlightenment. There are actually 37 stages of enlightenment. In Buddhism, they're called the Bodhipakshika Dharma. The 37 stages, and I'll be going into all those. So it's going to be fun. And I'm also giving a talk in the Druid community in Avebury, also in Britain, because as a Druid, I'm a great fan of Avebury, which is in Wiltshire near Stonehenge. So we'll be having a Druid gathering. And I hope to record these events. What else? Well, I think that's probably enough for now. Yes, it's today, by the way, is an international day dedicated to democracy, which obviously is very important. And I will say one thing. We just had the anniversary of the September the 11th tragedies in New York, and I set up this International Historical Commission of Inquiry into that. I've written a 2-volume book about it. Who did those events? And they started not on September the 11th, but on 2 days before, September the 8th or 9th, when the Afghan leader, Ahmad Shah Massoud, was killed. Somebody pretended to be coming to interview him, and inside the camera was a bomb. It blew up and killed this guy known as the Lion of Panjshir, who was standing up against the Taliban at the time, and he was a heroic guy. He was a protege of the French Lycée in Kabul. He spoke fluent French, and obviously Pashto and some English, but not fluent. And he was, he was a true Muslim in that he was a sage, a Sufi, an intellectual, but he was also a warrior who was defending his people against fanaticism and intolerance and ignorance. And the Taliban's form of Islam was girls can't go to school, all this sort of retrograde stuff. And he was blown up 2 days before the Twin Towers were blown up. Now, whoever did kill Ahmad Shah Massoud also was behind the Twin Towers. Now, the official story, of course, Bush announced within a week, within even a few days, was Osama bin Laden did this, right? And they found a passport in the rubble. There, we know who they were. However, having researched this in great detail, I'm the only historian who's actually bothered to take a couple of years to research it all. I knew people who were in New York who were there. I've been to New York myself several times. I was born just near. And there's something felt wrong, really, with this rush to blame Osama bin Laden. And he actually denied any involvement with it pretty soon afterwards. So anyway, I listened to, instead of organising a conference this year, which I normally do online, and invite intellectuals to discuss the history of all this, I've decided to do a series of one-to-one interviews this year, and I'll be interviewing people one-to-one. You can go into more detail. And one of the people I want to interview is a brilliant young Swiss-German historian who has a PhD in history. And he's written a book about all this called Daniel Ganser. And he's written a critical study of the 9/11 theory of the Bush, bin Laden did it, end of story. He says, no, it's not the case. And he gave a talk online a couple of days ago, which I listened to in great detail, close attention, about false flag operations in other historical phases, including the events that launched the Vietnam War. Johnson lied and said, American ships were attacked and therefore we're going to war. It's been proved that was all a lie. He reckons that Roosevelt had prior knowledge about Pearl Harbor. He'd cracked the codes and knew the Japs were coming, but didn't tell anyone, just shared that with a need-to-know top people so that then he could use it as a pretext to attack Japan, declare war, because he wanted to goad Japan into attacking. And I've read a book that, the evidence seems pretty clear that actually that's true. Roosevelt did know in advance. And his spies had cracked the most secret Japanese codes by which the Navy and the Air Force were all sharing stuff. But, that's pretty shocking, really, because if Roosevelt had said, we know what they're doing, it could have stopped the war. Biden tried to stop the invasion of Ukraine by Russia by saying, we know you're about to invade. They shared the intelligence. It didn't help. Maybe it delayed the invasion by a few weeks, is all. But there are big moral questions, and then there are other cases of false flags that he discusses. And then he comes to 9/11. He says, no, the evidence is definitely false flags. So, if that's true, my book actually starts from that hypothesis that the Bush doctrine theory is not true. There's enough evidence to show if it's like a boat, it would have so many holes, it would just leak and drown, It's not true. But then the question is, well, what is true? Who pre-wired the buildings and why? And who exactly did one of the questions that was asked is, do you think the president knew at the time? Was Bush in on this? So there are very important questions to ask, and I'm hopefully going to interview Daniel Ganser and others. I'd like to interview Chomsky if he's still able to converse. I know he's getting on very, very much, and I did ask him a question in a talk he gave, which I attended, because I like his views. He's gone on about American democracy as imperialism, just cloaked and made to look nice. But has he ever actually looked at this stuff to do with 9/11? And if not, why not? So I'm going to be asking him, I hope, and others. There's an interesting woman called Linda Forsyth who's been going to. There's a particular prison, I think it's in Texas, where there's a live feed to the Guantanamo Bay prison court, where these people that have been kept there for years and years and years are being processed through pre-trial legal hearings. And you can actually go to this prison in Texas and the cameras relay the feed. So it's as if you're in the courtroom in Guantanamo Bay. And what's extraordinary is that nobody in Guantanamo Bay has ever been charged officially in law with having engineered 9/11. Not a single person has ever been either accused or found guilty. It's never come to court. And what's interesting is, I think the name of one of the chief people is Zacharias Masui, who has been claimed to be the chief mastermind. And what this woman, Linda Forsyth, has discovered is that his lawyers have called for all the evidence on the collapse of Building 7 in New York, which happened, of course, on the same day as the Twin Towers came down, and yet no plane hit it. It was collapsed into its own footprint, obviously pre-wired. It was a demolition job. And so, quite rightly, his defence lawyers are intelligent. They've seen the films we've all seen. And they've asked the American government to release all their secret documents about the collapse of Building 7. And of course the American government's saying, no way, you can't have them, or giving them redacted stuff all blacked out. So there's a legal battle going on in Guantanamo Bay, which is very interesting, and I'd like to interview Linda Forsyth, who can talk more about it. And then there's my colleague David Hughes, Dr. David Hughes, international relations expert, who's the only international relations scholar that wrote a learned study of why the international relations profession, thousands of experts paid vast amounts of money to study this stuff. He's the only guy that's ever questioned the official story of 9/11. You know, where is everybody? I mean, I'm the only historian, apart from maybe Daniel Ganser. So that's the point of that project, is to bring some sort of intellectual fine-tooth comb to the study of 9/11, and because it was had such a phenomenal impact on history, it led to the invasion of Afghanistan and the deaths of many people, and it cost, I think, America like ridiculous sums of money to invade Afghanistan and hold it. And yet nothing was achieved. The same Taliban are now back running the country. So if I was an American citizen, I would be jumping up and down and organising hearings in Congress to say, like, why did we do that? What happened on 9/11? They've got to have an official second inquiry, because the Bush thing was a fig leaf, in my academic opinion. And so David Hughes, I'd like to interview and see what he's been doing recently in terms of research. So, you know, that's another part of the forest, is some of the research I'm up to. And I think I'm doing this because I have this very simple Gandhian concept that we get to peace through truth. The reason the world is so violent, so screwed up, is because people are lying. You know, we've seen that in the disinformation campaign called Brexit, which was the worst bunch of political lies I've heard in my lifetime. And we've seen it in the Trump era, when Trump he made lying a fine art. And even now it's fascinating to hear him claiming that the Haitian immigrants are eating all the dogs and cats in a little town in America. And it was all a total lie. Spread by right-wing hate groups. And I thought that debate was really interesting, Kamala versus Trump, and he's withdrawn. He can't appear in public. I mean, his devotees must be embarrassed. It's like wheeling out a naked emperor. His thinking is so, it doesn't really exist. So it was interesting to see in public, finally, he was getting a dressing down. I believe and pray that the American people will not consider re-electing him. I mean, that would be like self-defeat of the worst variety. And much as I love the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, and her running mate, Butch Ware, I mean, they're brilliant intellectually, but I don't agree with her argument that, don't vote for Kamala because she's an evil person, she's a war criminal just as much as Trump is, therefore vote for me. I think this is a wrong logical position to take, and that if I was an American, I would vote for the Democrats on this occasion. I mean, I might be a Green Party member. I like Jill Stein's policies on most things, but in terms of actually winning an election to defeat Trump, she has a snowball in hell's chance. So it's not happening. So I think she needs to diffuse her anti-Kamala rhetoric. That's just my advice to Jill. She's a clever lady, and she's sort of swallowed too much of her own rhetoric pills to realise that actually that's not helpful. But okay, so there we are. I think that's some of what I've been up to, and the world is still poised. You know, this war in Ukraine and Russia, it's still going on. They're now talking about sending missiles to go into Russia, British missiles, and to escalate the war, and then Putin saying, you do that, we're going to fire back. I still believe, and this is why I'm helping the Lex Innocentium team, I still believe that peace is possible if we look at things from an elevated enough perspective. I think the trouble with politicians is they fight trench warfare. They oversimplify their position, and it becomes black and white. It's me and they're the enemy, and that's what Putin did in his mind to ever think of invading his sister nation of Ukraine. All these problems they had could have been solved. One thing Daniel Ganser points out is that the American ambassador in 2014, when the events were happening in the Maidan, this woman Victoria Newland, his claim is maybe that was a false flag. Maybe NATO and America were behind the coup, which unseated the then Ukrainian president. But this is the claim made by Putin and Lavrov, and has been all along. I know Ukrainians who were in the square in Maidan who are not conspirators and not NATO stooges. They were just Democrats, not wanting Ukraine to fall into the hands of Putinism, and they were standing up for democracy. And the president, people died in that square. So I think, I don't think Victoria Nuland was a very intelligent diplomat. She's from that school of geopolitical bullying, which America excels in. But I don't think they went so far as to actually organise a coup. The key question is who was doing the shooting, and that's a question that Daniel Ganser raises. So I hope to interview him about this, because I think he's alleging that the CIA or someone nasty on the American intelligence team were shooting. I don't believe that's true. I'd love to see any evidence he has. The evidence I've seen is that no, these were forces loyal to the Putinist regime of the then leader, who was forced to step down by these street protests, which kept going for months. And led to lots of deaths, So, anyway, my job as an academic is to suspend judgment about all this, but these are important things that need clear thinking. And that's the point of philosophy, is to reason in depth about, these things and apply, critical analysis to it. Okay, so I think we'll stop there, and then we can go on. And if it's true that this Victoria Nuland, she made a silly comment which was picked up on a microphone saying, F the EU. And that's a disgraceful thing for her to have said. I hope she never comes back to Europe, because, that's the arrogance of the American geopolitical elite who don't understand that, no, hang on, we Europeans, we do matter, whether we're French, British, Romanian, whatever. And we're trying to get our act together as a people and no longer have wars. That was the point of the EU, in my opinion. And that's what it should be doing, and the Irish, and that's why I support it. But I want it to get its act together and do it properly, and not be turned into a sort of lapdog for American or any other kind of imperialism. It should be a peace force independent of other great powers, and a power in its own right, which uses the rose, the symbol of the Portuguese Revolution, the flower revolution, to advance peace around the world, not the gun. Okay, so there we are. Now, any questions? Let's have any comments or whatever, and then we'll look at our periodic table. I'm sure you have some observations to make, maybe?
Or just as you ended the Newland girl make a good resume of what was the objective. Maybe one of the objectives of this silly war between Russia and Ukraine is to destroy Europe.
I resent that.
When we see the result on especially Deutschland, Germany,